Thursday, August 27th, at approximately 1:30 p.m., officers responded to a call regarding a robbery in progress in the 3600 block of Penelope Street there in South Dallas. The call sheet on this call officers received indicated the suspect might be armed. A subsequent call indicated there was also a fire at the location. We've learned since that witnesses state that the suspect set the house on fire, 3610 Penelope. Dallas Fire Rescue and Dallas police officers arrived at this location. Upon arrival, officers observed the suspect in the corner of a vacant lot adjacent to 3610 Penelope. Officers approached the suspect to identify him. A struggle ensued after officers gave verbal commands to the suspect to show his hands, and the suspect didn't comply. Therefore, the struggle ensued. The suspect then threw some of his personal items at the officers as the struggle continued. The suspect then fled from police in an attempt to get into a vehicle. As additional officers arrived at the scene, officers deployed a taser, hitting the suspect twice. The taser was ineffective, and the suspect continued to struggle with officers. The struggle continued, and the suspect was able to make his entry into a vehicle. While inside the vehicle, officers continued to struggle with this suspect, and one of the officers discharged his weapon, striking the suspect, and the suspect was then transported by Dallas Fire Rescue and pronounced deceased at the local hospital. This incident remains under investigation. The suspect was armed with a box cutter that was found on his person. Per our policy, the officer was placed on routine administrative leave, and the Dallas District Attorney's Office is also conducting a concurrent investigation there at the scene as we speak. And we have also, per our policy, made notification to the Federal Bureau of Investigation Dallas office. Next of kin of this deceased suspect has not been made. So we have not notified the next of kin of this deceased suspect. Therefore, we won't be releasing his name. The suspect has an extensive criminal history involving violent crime and drug possession. So as soon as we're able to make notification of next of kin of the suspect, we'll release that to you all, and then we'll also release the name of the officer at that time as well, per our normal procedures. I'll take questions.
When you say the taser was ineffective, was it the taser didn't work at all, or it was ineffective in subduing him?
The taser releases prongs to a suspect. Those prongs from the taser struck the suspect and hit him and lodged and did not have any effect on him. A second officer deployed taser, and those prongs hit the suspect, and witnesses say the suspect basically pulled the prongs out and kept fighting.
So it did zap him?
But it didn't have any effect on him. Usually it makes you limp, go limp and numb. It did not have that effect on the suspect, continued to fight. Any other questions? This is very early on in the investigation. We'll likely learn more information about what happened. We don't yet know some details about this robbery. We don't know what was the point of the robbery, what the motives were for the robbery. Apparently, this victim of the robbery knew this suspect, and on the call sheet did state that the suspect was acting unusual. They're normally not acting this way. And there is some information on the call sheet that the suspect and the victim got into some type of altercation, and the victim had to arm themselves with a knife to keep from being harmed by this suspect, and the suspect fled. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, witnesses say the suspect set the house on fire as officers arrived.
What kind of impact does that have on officers responding when they have a situation with somebody and then there's a house on fire in addition to that situation?
It really adds to what is already a very volatile, fast-moving incident. So officers have to be keenly aware of their surroundings. Of course, officers receive some very good training, and cover officers are responding as well. So we end up having enough officers out there to handle this situation.
What did it tell you that this person, the taser was ineffective on as far as it not?
We would only speculate on why the taser wasn't effective. We have to determine through further investigation what that meant.
I mean, in your history as being chief and being an officer, how often do you see something like that?
Very rarely. Normally that happens when suspects are high on something or have some type of mental health issue where the tasers are not effective, but we don't know that. It's very early in the investigation.
What did he throw at the officer?
Personal items. We don't know the details of all those personal items. Detectives are at the scene collecting that as we speak, but these are witnesses who state that as the officers arrived and began talking, giving commands to the suspect, he began throwing personal items according to witness statements.
Chief, you said that there was 2 officers that was their tasers, correct?
Yes.
Was there a third one that came involved in the situation that then discharged his weapon?
There were several officers that interacted, either struggled with this suspect. There were obviously 2 separate officers that deployed a taser that didn't incapacitate this suspect. So we have yet to determine which officers did what parts of the struggle. There were multiple officers that came out to the scene, and as soon as we know more about the details of which officers interacted and how many, we'll release that to you.
Was Mace used at all?
No. As far as we know now, mace wasn't used. But again, we're continuing the investigation.
Chief, to us,
Excuse me? Only one officer is on leave. Yeah.
And he shot 1 time.
We don't know how many times he shot. We will yet determine that through the investigation. Yes.
Chief, to us, we've been using a lot of adjectives to describe the situation. Hectic certainly is one. How would you describe the overall scene that your officers were dealing with this man?
Very volatile. Just from the preliminary facts that we know, officers handled themselves really well in a very fast-moving, very volatile situation where you not only have information through the call sheet, at least from the victim that's called 911, that the suspect might be armed, but then you also have the house is set on fire, and then you have a non-compliant person. When you give live verbal commands, you have to get into a physical struggle with. And so that's a lot of things happening all at once. The officers have to digest that information as they're arriving and ask for more cover officers to arrive as well. So preliminarily, we're looking at some pretty good police work in the way that they dealt with all of this information happening and all of this very, very violent, volatile, behavior from this suspect. The taser not working when it normally does, make apprehending someone much easier. Continuing to struggle with this suspect, protecting themselves. All the officers are okay. So we, early on are looking at this as something that the officers should be not so as concerned with, because, obviously with police-involved shootings now in this country, we're very hypercritical of every officer's actions. But the suspect was armed with a box cutter. The officers struggled. The officers used deadly force as a last resort. They tried taser first. They tried loud commands. They tried to subdue him physically with their hands, and none of that worked. And of course, all of this happened at the end inside the car. I've read reports where the suspect was believed to have been shot by the officer while running. That is not factual. We know by evidence now that the shooting happened in the car as officers struggled with this suspect who was armed with a box cutter. Witnesses saw the box cutter on the suspect as that suspect struggled with our officers, and we retrieved the box cutter from the person of the suspect at the hospital. And so we have some facts to support some of the rumors that we've heard about the suspect being shot while running away. We know that to be not true, not factual, not supported by evidence. And that's why we're saying, with all these fast-moving facts and all of this, you know, the fire, the robbery, the non-compliance, the tasers not working but being tried twice, that the officers did what they were trained to do. It's unfortunate that this suspect is deceased, but we mentioned that this suspect has an extensive history of violent crime and drug possession.
What kind of position does that put your officers in when they do deploy a taser and it doesn't?
You initially, you know, want to know whether or not you need to deploy another one. So that happened. So another officer deployed a taser. And so that was a great reaction from the second officer. And then for that second deployment not to work, all you're left with is try to get enough officers to hold this person down till you can handcuff him. At that point, though, they're inside a car, and of course, the suspect being armed with a box cutter, at some point the officer had to make a decision whether deadly force was necessary, and that decision was made. And we'll be judging that decision as the investigation continues further.
Chief, to be clear, so that there isn't any assumption made on anyone's part, you say he was armed with a box cutter. Did your officers witness, from what you know, were your officers very well aware of that? Was he swiping at them? Can you say what you may know now about that?
Much of what we know now are from witnesses, not the involved officer that shot. The involved officer that shot is entitled to an attorney, and they're going to give us a statement eventually, but they don't have to give us a statement today. So much of what I'm recounting to you is from both witness officers and citizens that witnessed this, and we'll continue to talk to both these officers that witnessed this and to people in the neighborhood that might have witnessed portions of it.
So is it fair to say right now, maybe you can't say clearly whether he was waving this box cutter or if he just had it on him?
We don't have any of the details of how the fight occurred. What was he just swinging his arms? Did he have the box cutter as well? We do know witnesses saw the box cutter during the struggle. And we'll learn more facts as these officers give us statements and as we talk to more witnesses. The house, there is a record of it being a drug house in our narcotics file. So when the call came through, it came through as a drug house, and that's been confirmed through our files in our narcotics division.
When you say you have a history of violent crimes, what are some of these things?
Robbery, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon.
Did the officers sustain any injuries?
Well, we don't know for sure. None of the officers were transferred to the hospital or treated, but they may have bumps and bruises with many times they had to struggle with this suspect.
Did they break his window on the driver's side?
I don't have that information for you. When we further investigate, we'll release more information as we learn it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.